The reason only 5 countries, China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, have veto power in the United Nations Security Council is rooted in the historical context of the post-World War II era, when the United Nations was established. This setup reflects the geopolitical realities of that time, highlighting the role of these nations as the main victors of World War II and their status as the world's major powers. Here's a closer look at why these 5 nations have this unique authority. The United Nations was founded in 1945, following the devastation of World War II. Its creation was primarily led by the Allied powers who emerged victorious. The aim was to establish a global body that would prevent future world conflicts and foster international cooperation. The Security Council, one of the 6 principal organs of the UN, was designed to be the primary body responsible for maintaining international peace and security. The 5 permanent members of the Security Council, commonly referred to as the P5, are China, France, Russia, originally the Soviet Union, the UK, and the USA. These countries were granted veto power, which allows them to block any substantive resolution, including those on conflict resolution and sanctions, ensuring that no major decision can be made without their consent. 1. Global influence at the time. At the UN's founding, the P5 were considered the world's most powerful countries, both militarily and economically. The veto power was a recognition of their significant role in defeating the Axis powers and their influence in shaping the post-war world order. 2. Encouraging participation. By granting veto power, the framers of the United Nations Charter aimed to ensure the participation of these major powers in the international system, believing that their involvement was crucial for the organization's success and effectiveness. It was thought that without such power, these countries might not participate in the UN or support its actions, as evidenced by the failure of the League of Nations, which the USA never joined. 3. Maintaining international peace and security. The veto was also intended as a means of ensuring that any decision made by the Security Council would not directly oppose the interests of these powerful nations, thus hopefully preventing conflicts between them that could lead to another world war. The veto power of the P5 has been a subject of controversy and criticism. It is often seen as a tool that reflects the power dynamics of 1945 rather than the present day, potentially hindering the United Nations' ability to address global challenges effectively due to the differing interests of its permanent members. Critics argue that this system is undemocratic, as it prevents a majority from making decisions within the Security Council in cases where any of the P5 disagree. Many nations and groups have called for reform of the Security Council, proposing changes to its membership and the veto power to better reflect the current geopolitical realities. Proposals include expanding the number of permanent members to include countries like India, Brazil, Germany, and Japan, and limiting or abolishing the veto power of the permanent members. Despite these criticisms and proposals for reform, changing the veto system is challenging because such amendments to the United Nations Charter would require the agreement of all 5 permanent members, who may see little incentive to reduce their own power within the organization. This situation underscores the complexity of global governance and the difficulty of adapting long-standing international institutions to the changing realities of the world. Certainly, here are some examples of how veto power has been used by the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. Syria crisis. Russia, a permanent member of the Security Council, has repeatedly used its veto power to block resolutions aimed at condemning the Syrian government or imposing sanctions on the Assad regime during the ongoing civil war in Syria. This has been a source of contention among other Security Council members who advocate for stronger action to address the humanitarian crisis in Syria. Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The United States, another permanent member, has frequently exercised its veto power to shield Israel from resolutions critical of its actions in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. For example, the US has vetoed resolutions condemning Israeli settlements in the occupied territories or calling for investigations into alleged human rights abuses. Ukraine crisis. Russia used its veto power to block resolutions condemning its annexation of Crimea and its involvement in the conflict in eastern Ukraine. This has hindered efforts by other Security Council members to hold Russia accountable for its actions in Ukraine. In 2018, the United States, under the Trump administration, used its veto power to withdraw from the Iran Nuclear Deal Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or JCPOA, despite objections from other Security Council members. This decision had significant implications for international efforts to prevent Iran from developing nuclear weapons. North Korea. China, another permanent member, has used its veto power to prevent the imposition of harsh sanctions on North Korea in response to its nuclear weapons program. This has been a point of contention among other Security Council members seeking to pressure North Korea to denuclearize. In summary, the veto power of the 5 permanent members of the Security Council reflects the power dynamics of the post-World War II era and was intended to ensure their participation in the United Nations' efforts to maintain international peace and security. However, this system has faced criticism for its lack of democratic accountability and calls for reform to better reflect the realities of the contemporary world.